You serious?
Yeah. That's a funny way to put it.
Yeah.
Oh my god, dude.
What is that actually happened?
Of course it happened.
God.
I know guys on crack that makes more sense than you.
Today I'm going to have a quick look at Russia's attempt to go to the moon. The mission is known as Luna 25, supposedly launched yesterday. But already we've got problems left, right and centre. So let's just have a quick look. Get to look at some of the build quality here. Now, if we were to judge the build quality from these cartoons, and we were to base all our opinions about this lunar lander from Russia on these cartoons, I wouldn't be too disappointed if I was a space fan. They don't look too bad. The problem is when we actually see the lunar lander, see the real thing. That makes India's lunar lander look like a beautiful piece of art. Look here. That doesn't look anything like the cartoon. The cartoon looked pretty cool. This, I'm afraid to tell you guys, well, you don't really need to hear it from me. It's obviously a terrible space prop stroke art project. Dear oh dear.
Yeah.
More angles of this silly Luna 25 lander. Then we get this shot of what appears to be the team. And what's strange, when we do zoom in, I called it like an art project. And it would seem we've got nothing but young people here involved in this silly, terrible looking art project. No one looks impressed. Can see they even got the dinner lady out here in the middle. She doesn't look impressed. She's looking at all that tin foil thinking, I could have done so much more. You could have, my dear. That is terrible, lads. Now we start to see them load this work of art onto the rocket that's going to take this beautiful bit of technology, supposedly, to the moon. I think we get to see the rocket now. So the lunar lander's been put in the fairing, which is the white bit on the left-hand side. And of course, we get to see this Soyuz rocket here in all its glory here before it goes to the moon. More shot being transported to the launch site. This is a shot actually at the launch site. And this is where the problems begin, okay? See if you can spot the obvious problem here as we go from this shot to the launch.
Пуск. Пуск.
I do love a good firework display, but there's an obvious problem here. Most of you, I suspect, would have spotted it. Let's go back. Here's the Soyuz rocket that the lunar lander was attached to. Here's the Soyuz rocket that we just saw take off that's supposedly going to the moon. See the problem? Two totally different rockets. The rocket we saw the lunar lander attached to isn't the rocket we saw take off that was sighted as going to the moon. That rocket is white. The rocket we saw the lunar lander loaded to in the fairing is grey. All right, it has white fairing, but even the fairing is different. You've got ribs at the bottom of it where the fairing attaches to the rocket body, and at the end, the actual nose of the fairing is quite round. You then go to this rocket, there's no ribs where the fairing champers into the actual rocket, and the top of the fairing, essentially the nose of the rocket, is quite flat in comparison to this one. The grey rocket had the lunar lander loaded to it, yet the rocket that's supposedly going to the moon isn't the rocket that the lunar lander is attached to. You see the obvious problems with this silliness yet again? And this silliness ain't over. There's a side by side. There's the grey rocket at the launch pad. Let's head back to the footage anyway, because like I say, this silliness isn't over yet. So I fast forwarded the Russian firework display to here, okay?
Гад номер 12210 и космического аппарата Луна-Глоб выведен на опорную орбиту.
And then we get shown this obvious cartoon, and then we come to the next bit. I can't get a definite answer on this next clip we're about to see. I think people are too embarrassed to answer. I don't know if Russia are actually citing this next clip as real footage or not. Like I say, I can't get anyone to answer. I think if it is being cited, people are too embarrassed to answer. Because obviously this is a blatant cartoon. But check the next shot out. Joking, right? And then we get shown their flight profile. And this is just silly in itself, because Russia have only just supposedly left yesterday. And yet they're going to arrive there before India or at the same time. So if that's the case, why didn't India use the same flight profile? It's all silliness anyway. They can't get their pantomimes together. But Russia have got a bit of a problem with their lunar mission. They haven't even got the lunar lander on board the rocket they've sent. Just silliness of the highest order. And let's not forget this silly footage. 2 secs. And then we get to see absolute gems like this. Oh, I can't wait. The mainstream are reporting on this, who's going to win the space race. But anyone with the slightest discernment really looks at this in a totally different manner. Who's going to give us the most giggles? I can't wait. India or Russia? The technology in which India uses, namely CB radios. Oh, bless him. And here's your evidence that India has arrived at the moon. It's ridiculous. Terrible footage, accompanied by some music. No one saw this thing doing its loop-de-loop round the globe Earth, getting itself in its trajectory to get here. But suddenly it's arrived here. We got some music playing to sell this tosh. Oh dear. But look. The reason it's so jolty, they didn't have the technology to fake the reflections in the solar shields. And as a result, had to feed us this jerk fest here, because that was all they could fake. They couldn't fake it smoothly, because they were unable to because of the technology. What a charade this is. Now, is that as bad as the JAXA moon orbit from, I think it was 11 years ago that I showed? Is that as bad? It's on an equal level there, I'd say. It is equally as bad. Look. That is terrible. And there is supposed proof that India has arrived at the moon. And when you look at it, it's horrendous footage, backed up by no observations of any loop-de-loops. And of course we know it's just data and cartoons lapped up by naive individuals in the control room. Oh dear.
Operation for the Vikram lander has just been initiated with the firing of the 4 liquid engines, which I was mentioning, the 4 throttleable engines. The activity has just started. So we expect in the next 3 minutes, the velocity should come down to something like 146. So on your screen, you can see the plot where we have on the x-axis, the downrange, and on the y.
Look at how easy this silly charade is to pull off. You get a load of people in, you pay them a wage. They read and interpret data, and then suddenly think reality is exactly the opposite to what can be tested and verified by all. They justify that by clapping to cartoons on a TV screen and chatting to goodness knows who on CB radios. Dear oh dear.